Hi everybody, this is Toffee bringing you Act 3 of my Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia 100% growth except Python's defense, LTC. Act 3 is the first time we simultaneously control Alm and Celica's armies, meaning we have to start considering the order we play the maps in. We want to play Alm's route first for a few different reasons. There is a peddler on each route who can transport an item to the other army, and in this run, Alm sends a fully forged killer bow to Celica to get Leon going. This isn't strictly necessary, since it is possible to forge a killer bow on Celica's route by grinding for money, but the one remaining turn save over my run requires Alm to send a different item to Celica to use in Act 3, a Pegasus cheese. In contrast, Celica will send the Rain Shield to Alm, but he doesn't really need it until Act 4, and in fact Celica wants to keep it during Act 3 since it can teach Shove. Alm picks up the remaining gear in Zofia Castle before heading out. Another reason why we want to do Alm's route first is that the map spawns from Griet Citadel are affected by the progress Alm makes on his route, and the optimal EXP allocation on Celica's route requires the Myrmidons to spawn from Griet Citadel as opposed to the Brigands. Oh yeah, map spawns. This run is going to face any map spawns it can get away with that don't affect the turn count in the interest of farming more EXP. Time for a taste of hell. This is the first map with witches, and to make matters worse, we need them to cooperate with us, not just for the optimal clear, but also for the optimal EXP distribution. We'll undeploy a bunch of units who would only serve to distract them. If we had trained Claire to swap already, which I verified would be possible without affecting anything important, we could have tweaked this clear to start working on training up a third swap bot in either Clive or Python. Unfortunately, our Claire is 1 point short because I didn't do a certain optimization to one of the maps in Act 1. So we're gonna have to uh, live without it. Faye needs the extra square from a swap so that Silk can warp her onto like a far enough forward square that she can get in range of all of the one range enemies in the enemy formation in the center of the map. Faye obviously can't counter the archers, but because she's so buff, we can put other units in range of them and they will prefer to go for them. Faye hit level 9 there, and she needs to hit level 10 by the end of this enemy phase in order to learn Rescue. This will require one of the witches to go for her. Furthermore, in the interest of optimal EXP distribution, we want the witch to go for her at the end of enemy phase, letting her maximize her EXP from the other enemies, which helps reduce EXP wastage later. Cliff will handle Fernand's squad by himself. If we had Swap Claire, we could have boosted Grey forward by a square with some careful trading, which would let him enemy phase both archers near Faye on turn 1. Instead, we bait the second archer with Claire. We want one of the witches to attack a unit near Grey because she eventually needs to die to him. Getting the other witch to go for Faye will require some turn wheel abuse. The next segment of the video is just going to be me attacking enemies in different orders to try and cheat the RNG into getting the witch to go for Fae. And actually pulling this off ends up requiring me to burn all of my turn wheel uses. My actions are a little hesitant because behind the scenes there was a good amount of trial and error involved here with save states. And with our last turn wheel, that will get Faye over the hump to learn Rescue. I immediately make a bookmark here, not because I need to hack any weapon stats, but just because I wanted to back up this save file after, like, it took me a lot of attempts to actually get this to work. Right now, Cliff's steel bow is hacked to have subpar hit and because we want him to chip Fernand for a little bit of extra EXP. Over here, the reason why we undeployed all of our scrub units is because we want this witch to attack Grey on enemy phase, which he will do if none of the other targets are particularly tempting, because Grey has the lowest resistance of all of the units in this part of the map. In fact, I think he has the lowest resistance stat of all of the units I actually deployed. If we had Swap Glare before this map, then Grey would have enemy faced both archers on turn 1, and he could take a player face kill on this witch, which would which would be the thing that would let us like train up either Swap Clive or Swap Python, since you would not have to undeploy them on this map. Now, the reason why we wanted Faye to learn Rescue is because we need someone to kill the boss. And the way we're going to do that is we have Faye rescue Silk forward, and then Silk is going to warp Faye in range of the boss. I suspended there to set Cliff's bow back up to perfect hit and crit so he could handle the rest of Finance Squad. And that will be 3-1 the Battle of Northern Zofia in 2 turns. Once we clear the first battle on the route, for every map we will have to consider the question of whether we want to face map spawns, and if so, which ones. The next map, Arkwoods, named for being a map with a bunch of Arcanists in the woods, has its map spawn show up in the top left part of the map, far away from any of the other units, which costs us at least a turn, so we won't bother. Cliff will handle the top part of the map with the help of Silk's Warp, while Faye will take care of the 3 Arcanists who start relatively close to us. We want Cliff to whiff one hit on the boss to gain chip EXP without activating heal AI. But here he crits, so we need to turn wheel back in order to reroll the RNG. We want Gray to get around a chip in on this Arcanist so that he hits level 7 and is ready to promote for the next map. We need to boost Faye 2 squares in a straight line, which requires us to deploy 3 trade bots and have Claire fly over from the center group which is the reason why we needed swap on her specifically by this map. The reason we couldn't do a diagonal double swap, which only requires one trade bot, is because of the layout of the forest near Faye's starting point. It's the best square we can give her, given Grey also needs to chip the Arcanist. We need Faye to kill the Arcanist Grey chip since we don't want his kill EXP to go to waste. We suspend to set Cliff's bow to perfect hit and crit before we massacre everyone left on the map to complete it in one turn. We head back to Deliverance HQ to promote Grey. As a level 1 sniper, he's 6 levels behind Cliff, but we're going to start focusing on him for a couple of the Act 3 clears. For the next map, we want to face the Paladin map spawn from Desaix Fortress, since the enemies all start in range to suicide into our 3 growth units. It can be hard to remember given we went and did all of Act 2 in the interim, but Grey actually promoted only 3 maps after Cliff. With a little hover rigging, we get the map spawn where we want it, and it's time for the Forest Crossroads battle. We want Faye to hit level 12 during this map, which will require us to pull out the Rusted Shield on her again, as well as giving Cliff the Leather Shield to pump his defense. We could not have afforded to simply miss defense levels on Faye because Faye wants to maximize her defense for a certain map in Act 4. Bray starts off with some chip before we suspend to set his weapon to perfect hit and crit. I didn't actually need to undeploy anyone on this map. It's possible to deploy everyone in the army and put them in position so that the irrelevant units all stay safely out of enemy range. Cliff positions himself there so as to block the Mire Arcanist from being able to go for Faye, who can't counter. Grey and Faye are positioned very precisely to divert a couple of enemies who would not give Cliff all that much EXP, but they would benefit a lot from. We want exactly 2 Cavaliers to go for Fae, and that will get her to level 12, which is also the reason why we wanted to maximize her EXP in the first map of Act 3. Getting the Witch to go for her last ensures that she only needs 2 Cavalier kills on this map. If we'd moved her any further ahead, the Paladins would have gone for her. Faye unlocks her promotion, but we will actually delay it by a map since I wanted to minimize her effective level after promotion as a minor EXP optimization, since she will gain a level on the next map anyway, and there are no other crucial spells she wants to work towards. And that concludes the Crossroads battle in one turn. We visit the forest village to pick up some items, recruit Luthier, and to forge a killer bow. Luthier is just a filler unit who is going to help trade items around, though at this point we have enough of those that I don't think he's ever strictly necessary. He brings us an extra deployment slot, I suppose. The killer bow is obviously stronger than the steel bow that we've been working with, but it's also convenient in that enemies never use them, meaning we can freely hack its accuracy and crit rate on future maps without worrying about how it will affect the enemy's behavior. If we sat around grinding for money, we could forge it to maximum right here, but I only actually needed it maxed out for the final map of Alms Act 3. If we were training Clive up as a swap bot, we would want to grind up enough money to forge the steel lance to a javelin and then a Saunion right now. But we're going to use a different unit as our third swapper, so that can wait. I didn't really need to hardcore grind money on arms route in this run. Mhm. We're not forging the killer bow up to a point where it has stars. Like, we're not going to give it a name quite yet. But I do have a nice little naming convention that I use for every bow after this particular killer bow. This killer bow is not going to match that naming convention because I thought of it after I'd forged it, and the name I eventually end up giving it is also something I wanted to have in this run. For Desaix's Fortress, we're going to want to rig a map spawn paladin for that map because normally with the map spawn, it's impossible to one turn the map, which is why the DLC run does not rig a map spawn. But in our case, we cannot one turn the map even without the map spawn because the one turn clear requires a mage ring, which we obviously don't have. And I am going to demonstrate on that map the difference one turn can make in terms of EXP distribution. For now, though, I'll leave you to watch my horrible menuing, and I will join you again once we start the assault on Desaix's fortress. Desaix's fortress has one witch off to the right and packs all the other enemies into the fortress. This makes it seem like a one turn is possible, but a few factors conspire to prevent it in a non DLC playthrough. There are two passive enemies in the central area, a cantor and an archer who is always going to prioritize targeting Matilda. We can boost two units in the absence of map spawns with Fae and Silk, but Desaix is so beefy with heavy armor to boot that a bow user is not reasonably one-rounding him. This requires us to send in a mage, but the presence of another archer means that this will add an extra passive enemy who could go for either the mage or for Fae, preventing the one turn. The one turn in DLC requires a couple of mage rings on Fae and Mage Tobin. This one extra turn with the DLC run we get here is going to prove to be massively significant, since this map is going to see Grey go on a huge killing spree with our fresh killer bow courtesy of the map spawn to help him catch up to Cliff, since we need two bow knights for the final map of Alms Act 3. If we wanted to train Clive up to learn Swap, we would want to boost him to the right so he could face 4 rounds of combat with the Witch across the 2 turns with Saunian, but we don't need to bother with that, so with a single swap, Cliff can deal with her. Faye wasn't promoted for this map because she doesn't really need the extra point of movement quite yet, and I worked out that she could just barely squeeze in an extra level as an unpromoted unit. Gray didn't do all that much damage to Desaix, but he's gonna gain 4 levels on this enemy phase just from all the enemies he massacres. The reason we have all of these extra enemies, of course, is because we rigged the Paladin map spawn. Gray's killer bow obviously has perfect hit and crit. I turn wheel here because I forgot for a moment that killing the Cantor would kill his summons as well. Like I was panicking. Oh man, like what do I do about the summons? But then I realized, oh yeah, right. So a little bit of hesitation here before I actually just work Faye in to be our Desaix killer, since magic is the only real way to crack him open. This little scrap of EXP on Faye does matter. On enemy phase, Desaix dies to Faye's Nosferatu crits, letting her exactly hit level 13, completing the map in 2 turns. We raid Desaix Fortress for all the goodies and an extra unit. The new face is Matilda, a paladin who's actually going to be relevant to this run. The important thing about Matilda is that she's a high movement lance user who actually has adequate basis for a rigged run, which is useful because it helps with optimizing EXP and to let us finally get our third swap user online. The Pegasus cheese we pick up here would need to be sent to Celica's route in a truly turn flowed run. I just ended up trading it to the cheese lover in Zofia Castle for an exotic spice, which is just money at the end of the day, which could be made up for with enough grinding. One nice thing about using Matilda as our third swap user instead of Clyde is that she has a decent resistance base, which again helps with EXP optimization on a particular Act 4 map. The downside is that because we don't already have our third swap user, Cliff's EXP gain is going to be negatively impacted on the next map. I forgot to promote Faith, which is why we're going to head back again. After she promotes, Faye needs to gain 2 more points of speed for a boss kill in Act 4, which she will barely pull off in time. Ditching Mage Tobin really shines a spotlight on Faye's EXP management, doesn't it? As a Saint, Faye has 5 move and learns Seraphim. She can learn anew, but it's at such a ridiculously high level that no LTC of the main campaign is reasonably hitting it. We rig an Arcanist map spawn from the Sluice Gate for the next map. 2 swap users are all we need to one-turn this map with 2 snipers normally, but we want the map spawn to pump more EXP into Grey. However, this means that the square the sniper on the right needs to reach is moved up by 1, and in the absence of a third swap user, we need to put Silk on the right to warp Grey into position. Faye with 2 swaps cannot get Cliff onto a square on the left where he can handle all the enemy paladins, so Matilda gets to make a cameo as an actual combat unit helping with the route. We set the default lance on enemies to have negligible hit, and give her a max crit Rider's Bane to slaughter all of them. Grey and Cliff, of course, are using perfect crit bows. If you're wondering how we get multiple swaps, given our units are somewhat spread out and we couldn't just rely on trading a single leather shield around, we could forge a Saunion. The reason Grey needs to be 1 square up is so that he could get in range of one of the Arcanists that were added on the map. The Arcanists give Grey roughly 1 extra level over what he otherwise would have gotten, which is quite nice. Cliff steals 1 kill so that his EXP gain improves at least a little bit and he gets another level up, which means that the end of chapter bonus EXP won't mostly go to waste. We will witness another massacre on this enemy phase, which will complete the map in 1 turn. Gray gains a total of 3 levels on this map, and both he and Cliff end the map at level 9. And as a matter of fact, Gray is actually going to be ahead of Cliff EXP wise. We could do the Sylvan Shrine, but we don't need to quite yet, and I figured I could do it after the next map and handle my promotions then. We won't face map spawns on this map because they spawn inconveniently off to the left, and we can't really get anyone in range of them since this is going to be a one-turn clear. This map has a witch who needs to be enemy faced, so we undeploy everyone who isn't needed. Cliff is actually behind Grey on EXP, so we will feed him the boss kill and the sniper kills by being the one warped ahead. Getting him to hit level 10 will require the witch in the top left part of the map to go for him specifically. Grey only needs to kill the archers and the other witch to hit level 10, so he's the one who is rescued. Grey and Cliff, of course, have perfect crit, and as a matter of fact, because Grey is using the iron bow, this means that the archers who go for him are going to crit him. But he has so much defense that he doesn't really care. We need both Cliff and Grey to hit level 10 on this map, since we need two bow knights for Sluice Gate. We simply crit all the enemies to death to finish the map in one turn. It's time for the Sylvan Shrine. The Sylvan Shrine has two resistance spells that we will eventually give to all. A set of three linked HP and EXP wells, which obviously we care about the EXP wells and not so much giving any units extra HP, given that this is a 100% growth run. And some money, and like it helped, and there are a couple of quests that involve this area. You're going to have to sit through me breaking these boxes because I decided when recording that I wanted to do that. Probably could have cut it out of the video, but it's okay. We are going to promote Gray and Cliff here. At this point, we could choose either one of them to be the primary power leveled Bow Knight for the rest of the run. I chose Cliff in line with the typical meta since he has the better resistance stat. But since we're hacking enemy Arcanist accuracy, the resistance difference between them doesn't really matter too much. The quests in Sylvan Shrine are rescuing a little girl who's by the Miller statue and finding some writing to further a quest which we'll complete in Act 4. However, I didn't realize that you need to rescue the girl and then talk to the merchant's wife in the forest village to actually start the second quest. So finding the writing right now is pointless. At the end of this chamber is a gold mark. I barely acknowledged it at all, but this is a dungeon where we do not have any encounters that we care to fight, so we've been sneaking past all of the enemies. And over here we could evacuate, but it turns out it's possible to just sprint past all these gargoyles. We've power leveled our three Ram villagers, and they're all going to be in their final classes. But, there's somebody else on our squad who was sitting on the bench for all this time because he wanted to give all the scrubs the chance to build up enough of a lead over him to give him an actual challenge to distinguish himself. But, he's still at base. But Python, it's time for him to start getting involved. Sluice Gate is going to be the first time he does something uniquely useful in this run. We're just moving back and forth because we want to make sure that there isn't a zombie in the chamber we want to visit. But of course, like in the grand scheme of things, it's pointless because that chamber is for activating a quest. Is part of the second quest, which we haven't even activated yet. For saving the girl, we get the Blessed Lance, which we will eventually send over to Celica to forge up. And this is where I actually activate the quest, and then I go and complete the first leg of it. Time to get some forging done. We forge ourselves the first Saunion of the run. The Saunion at first glance is a meme weapon, but it has a number of subtle pros that outweigh the obvious con of lacking wand range. We can play around the lack of wand range by staying at the edges of ranged enemies' attack ranges, or by taking advantage of choke points. And the access to 3 range importantly allows it to counter Mire Arcanists. Additionally, it has Swap as a combat art, and all of our primary Swap bots can wield lances. It is a little pricey, costing a gold mark, but money is only limited by your patience to cut grass in this game. We're also going to make our first named forge. The regular killer bow is normally sufficient for the one turn of Sluice Gate, but we want to clear the map with the map spawn for the sake of EXP and weapon EXP, and this requires Python to make his first contribution to the run. However, since he's at base, he needs all the help he can get, so we're going to max out our killer bow. The name is a reference to Juan776's DLC LTC of this game, and is the one outlier among the rest of the Forge names. If I were to give it a name more in line with the rest, I would have named it Donovan. With map spawn in tow, we head into Sluice Gate. We could technically one turn this map with just one Bow Knight if we sacrificed Phase EXP and the map spawn, but that's not how we roll. Instead, we will take advantage of the map spawn to train Matilda up to swap in one map with our new Soundion. Since Cliff is our primary bow knight, who's going to be walked in to kill the boss, he takes our one remaining bow, since he needs 5 range for that. Since we're plugging the choke point on the left with Faye, Gray needed to be a bow knight so he could still get to the square he needs to. Gray himself does not require 5 range for this clear, so he takes the leather shield in order to work on learning swap. Swap on Gray is going to matter exactly once in Act 4. We do a really long trade chain to get the Saunion onto Matilda after Claire used it for the swap. Matilda needs to land exactly one hit on that Arcanist in order to get him to attack her on enemy phase. She needs a player phase round of combat so she can actually get 5 rounds of combat in on this map. But if she were to double hit that Arcanist, then he would choose to go for Fae. This one Arcanist at the very left has Mire, and this means that Fae would not be able to counter him on enemy phase, and that's where Python comes in. With the Max Forge Killer Bow, he has just enough attack to one-shot him with a crit, gaining his first level up. We set the Saunion to perfect hit and crit for this enemy phase so Matilda can actually kill the 4 Arcanists who'll go for her. Killing Tatara, the boss, broke Delphia out of her trance and she got out. We once again carry out a massacre, with Faye picking up another level, leaving her just one speed shot of hitting her Act 4 benchmark. You might see how hard our bow knights are curb stomping these enemies and wonder why I even mentioned the concept of a primary bow knight. But in Act 4, we start facing barons, generic barons, on the enemy side who have heavy armor, and so our bow knights need to hit some pretty high strength benchmarks to actually cleanly wander on them. Well, I say cleanly, I'm talking something like a hunter's volley double crit for a couple of those annoying barons. Matilda gains quite a bit of EXP, but this is the last map where she's really relevant as a combat unit. Faye, as previously mentioned, is just one speed shot of hitting her Act 4 benchmark, and that is Sluice Gate in one turn. We recruit Delphia, pick up some items, and then ship the killer bow off to complete Alm's Act 4 maps. Delphia herself is just a filler unit. As previously mentioned, a truly turn float run would send the Pegasus cheese instead of the killer bow over here. Alm will now position himself at the Deliverance HQ to help hover rig map spawns for Celica.